The Rigveda Sanskrit, Arjveda from Rc. Praise, and Veda knowledge, is an ancient Indian collection of Vedic Sanskrit hymns along with associated commentaries on liturgy, ritual and mystical exegesis. It is one of the four sacred canonical texts Shruti of Hinduism known as the Vedas. The core text, known as the Rigveda Samhita, is a collection of 1028 hymns suktas in about 10,600 verses called Rc, eponymous of the name Rigveda, organized into 10 books Mandalas. In the 8 books that were composed the earliest, the hymns are mostly praise of specific deities. The younger books, books 1 and 10, in part also deal with philosophical or speculative questions, with the virtue of dana, charity, in society, and with other metaphysical issues in their hymns. The oldest layers of the Rigveda Samhita are among the oldest extant texts in any Indo-European language, perhaps of similar age as certain Hittite texts. Philological and linguistic evidence indicates that the bulk of the Rigveda Samhita was composed in the northwestern region of the Indian subcontinent, most likely between c. 1500 and 1200 BC, although a wider approximation of c. 1700 to 1100 BC has also been given. The initial codification of the Rigveda took place during the early Kuru kingdom c. 1200 to 900 BC. Some of its verses continue to be recited during Hindu rites of passage celebrations such as weddings and prayers, making it probably the world's oldest religious text in continued use. The associated material has been preserved from 2 shakas or schools, known as Sakalya and Baskala. The school-specific commentaries are known as Brahmanas, Aitareya Brahmana and Kaushitaki Brahmana, Aranyakas, Aitareya Aranyaka and Kaushitaki Aranyaka, and Upanishads, partly excerpted from the Aranyakas, Bharcha Brahmana Upanishad, Aitareya Upanishad, Samhita Upanishad, Kaushitaki Upanishad. Topic: Text. Topic: Organization. Mandalas. The text is organized in 10 books, or mandalas, circles, of varying age and length. The text clearly originates as oral literature, and books may be a misleading term. The individual mandalas are, much rather, standalone collections of hymns that were intended to be memorized by the members of various groups of priests. This is particularly true of the family books. Mandalas 2 to 7, which form the oldest part of the Rigveda and account for 38% of the entire text. They are called family books because each of them is attributed to an individual rishi and was transmitted within the lineage of this rishi's family, or of his students. The hymns within each of the family books are arranged in collections each dealing with a particular deity. Agni comes first, Indra comes second, and so on. They are generally arranged by decreasing number of hymns within each section. Within each such collection, the hymns are arranged in descending order of the number of stanzas per hymn. If 2 hymns in the same collection have equal numbers of stanzas, then they are arranged so that the number of syllables in the meter are in descending order. The 2nd to 7th mandalas have a uniform format. The 8th and 9th mandalas, comprising hymns of mixed age, account for 15% and 9%, respectively. The 9th manadala is entirely dedicated to Soma and the Soma ritual. The hymns in the 9th mandala are arranged by both their prosody structure chanda and by their length. The 1st and the 10th mandalas are the youngest. They are also the longest books, of 191 suktas each, accounting for 37% of the text. Nevertheless, some of the hymns in mandalas 8, 1 and the 10th of May still belong to an earlier period and may be as old as the material in the family books. The first mandala has a unique arrangement not found in the other 9 mandalas. The first 84 hymns of the 10th mandala have a structure different than the remaining hymns in it. Prosody. Each mandala consists of hymns or suktas su plus ukta, literally, well-recited, eulogy, intended for various rituals. The suktas in turn consist of individual stanzas called rc, praise, place, RCAs, which are further analyzed into units of verse called pada, foot, or step. The meters most used in the RCAs are the Gayatri, 3 verses of 8 syllables, Anushtub 4 by 8, Trishtub 4 by 11, and Jagati 4 by 12. The Trishtub meter 40% and Gayatri meter 25% dominate in the Rigveda. For pedagogical convenience, each mandala is divided into roughly equal sections of several suktas, called Anuvaka, recitation, which modern publishers often omit. Another scheme divides the entire text over the 10 mandalas into Astaka, eighth, Adhyaya, chapter, and Varga, class. Some publishers give both classifications in a single edition. The most common numbering scheme is by book, hymn and stanza, and pada A, B, C. If required, e.g., the first verse is in 3 times 8 syllables, Gayatri. 1.1.1a Agnam la Purohitam 1b Yajñasya Devam Artivijam 1c Hotaram Ratna dh Tamam. Agni I invoke, the house priest, the god, minister of sacrifice, the presiding priest, bestower of wealth. Composers. Tradition associates a rishi, the composer, with each RC of the Rigveda. Most suktas are attributed to single composers. The family books 2 to 7 are so called because they have hymns by members of the same clan in each book, but other clans are also represented in the Rigveda. In all, 10 families of rishis account for more than 95% of the RCs. For each of them the Rigveda includes a lineage-specific Apri hymn, a special sukta of rigidly formulaic structure, used for rituals. Transmission. The original text, as authored by the rishis, is close to but not identical to the extant Samhitapatha, but metrical and other observations allow reconstruction, in part at least, of the original text from the extant one, as printed in the Harvard Oriental Series, Volume 50, 1994. The surviving form of the Rigveda is based on an early Iron Age collection that established the core family books, mandalas 2 to 7, ordered by author, deity, and meter, and a later redaction, co-eval with the redaction of the other Vedas, dating several centuries after the hymns were composed. This redaction also included some additions contradicting the strict ordering scheme and orthoepic changes to the Vedic Sanskrit, such as the regularization of Sandhi, termed Orthoepish Diaskua by Oldenburg, 1888. As with the other Vedas, the redacted text has been handed down in several versions, most importantly the Padapatha, in which each word is isolated in pausa form and is used for just one way of memorization, and the Samhitapatha, which combines words according to the rules of Sandhi, the process being described in the Pratisakya, and is the memorized text used for recitation. The Padapatha and the Pratisakya anchor the text's true meaning, and the fixed text was preserved with unparalleled fidelity for more than a millennium by oral tradition alone. In order to achieve this, the oral tradition prescribed very structured enunciation, involving breaking down the Sanskrit compounds into stems and inflections, as well as certain permutations. This interplay with sounds gave rise to a scholarly tradition of morphology and phonetics. The Rigveda was probably not written down until the Gupta period, 4th to 6th centuries AD, by which time the Brahmi script had become widespread. The oldest surviving manuscripts are from AD 1040, discovered in Nepal. The oral tradition still continued into recent times. There is a widely accepted timeframe for the initial codification of the Rigveda by compiling the hymns very late in the Rigvedic, or rather in the early post-Rigvedic period, including the arrangement of the individual hymns in 10 books, coeval with the composition of the younger Veda Samhitas. This time coincides with the early Kuru kingdom, shifting the center of Vedic culture east from the Punjab into what is now Uttar Pradesh. The fixing of the Samhitapatha by enforcing regular application of Sandhi and of the Padapatha by dissolving Sandhi out of the earlier metrical text, occurred during the later Brahmana period, in roughly the 6th century BC. Recensions. Several shakas, branches, i.e., recensions of Rig Veda are known to have existed in the past. Of these, Sakalya is the only one to have survived in its entirety. Another shaka that may have survived is the Baskala, although this is uncertain. The surviving Padapatha version of the Rigveda text is ascribed to Sakalya. The Sakala recension has 1017 regular hymns, and an appendix of 11 Valakilya hymns which are now customarily included in the 8th mandala as 8.49 to 8.59, for a total of 1028 hymns. The Baskala recension includes 8 of these Valakilya hymns among its regular hymns, making a total of 1025 regular hymns for this Saka. In addition, the Baskala recension has its own appendix of 98 hymns, the Kilani. In the 1877 edition of Aufrecht, the 1028 hymns of the Rigveda contain a total of 10,552 arsis, or 39,831 padas. The Shatapatha Brahmana gives the number of syllables to be 432,000, while the metrical text of Van Newton and Holland 1994 has a total of 395,563 syllables, or an average of 9.93 syllables per pada. Counting the number of syllables is not straightforward because of issues with Sandhi and the post-Rigvedic pronunciation of syllables like Suvar as Svar. 3 other shakas are mentioned in Karanavyuha, a Parisista supplement of Yajurveda, Mandukayana, Asvalayana and Sankayana. The Atharvaveda lists 2 more shakas. The differences between all these shakas are very minor, limited to varying order of content and inclusion or non-inclusion of a few verses. The following information is known about the shakas other than Sakalya and Baskala. Mandukayana, perhaps the oldest of the Rigvedic shakas. Asvalayana, includes 212 verses, all of which are newer than the other Rigvedic hymns. Sankayana, very similar to Asvalayana. Sasirya, mentioned in the Rigveda Pratisakya. Very similar to Sakala, with a few additional verses, might have derived from or merged with it. Manuscripts. Writing appears in India around the 3rd century BC in the form of the Brahmi script, but texts of the length of the Rigveda were likely not written down until much later, and the oldest extant manuscripts date to AD 1040, discovered in Nepal. While written manuscripts were used for teaching in medieval times, they were written on birch bark or palm leaves, which decompose and therefore were routinely copied over the generations to help preserve the text. Some Rigveda commentaries may date from the second half of the 1st millennium AD. The hymns were thus composed and preserved by oral tradition for several millennia from the time of their composition until the redaction of the Rigveda, and the entire Rigveda was preserved in shakas for another 2,500 years from the time of its redaction until the Editio Princeps by Rosen, Aufrecht and Max Müller. Versions. There are, for example, 30 manuscripts of Rigveda at the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, collected in the 19th century by Georg Bühler, Franz Kielhorn and others, originating from different parts of India, including Kashmir, Gujarat, the then Rajputana, central provinces etc. They were transferred to Deccan College, Pune, in the late 19th century. They are in the Sharada and Devanagari scripts, written on birch bark and paper. The oldest of them is dated to 1464. The 30 manuscripts of Rigveda preserved at the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, Pune were added to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2007. Of these 30 manuscripts, 9 contain the Samhita text, 5 have the Padapatha in addition. 13 contain Sayana's commentary. At least 5 manuscripts Ms. Number 1, A1879-80, 1, A1881-82, 331 1883-84 and 5, Vis I have preserved the complete text of the Rigveda. Ms. No 5 1875-76, written on birch bark in bold Sharada, was only in part used by Max Müller for his edition of the Rigveda with Sayana's commentary. Müller used 24 manuscripts then available to him in Europe, while the Pune edition used over 5 dozen manuscripts, but the editors of Pune edition could not procure many manuscripts used by Müller and by the Bombay edition, as well as from some other sources, hence the total number of extant manuscripts known then must surpass perhaps 80 at least. Comparison. The various Rigveda manuscripts discovered so far show some differences. Broadly, the most studied Sakala recension has 1017 hymns, includes an appendix of 11 Valakilya hymns which are often counted with the 8th mandala, for a total of 1028 metrical hymns. The Basikala version of Rigveda includes 8 of these Valakilya hymns among its regular hymns, making a total of 1025 hymns in the main text for this Saka. The Basikala text also has an appendix of 98 hymns, called the Kilani, bringing the total to 1,123 hymns. The manuscripts of Sakala recension of the Rigveda have about 10,600 verses, organized into 10 books mandalas. Books 2 through 7 are internally homogeneous in style, while books 1, 8 and 10 are compilation of verses of internally different styles, suggesting that these books are likely a collection of compositions by many authors. The first mandala is the largest, with 191 hymns and 2006 verses, and it was added to the text after books 2 through 9. The last, or the 10th book, also has 191 hymns but 1,754 verses, making it the second largest. The language analytics suggest the 10th book, chronologically, was composed and added last. The content of the 10th book also suggests that the authors knew and relied on the contents of the first 9 books. The Rigveda is the largest of the 4 Vedas, and many of its verses appear in the other Vedas. Almost all of the 1,875 verses found in Samaveda are taken from different parts of the Rigveda, either once or as repetition, and rewritten in a chant song form. The books 8 and 9 of the Rigveda are by far the largest source of verses for Sama Veda. The book 10 contributes the largest number of the 1,350 verses of Rigveda found in Atharvaveda, or about 1/5 of the 5,987 verses in the Atharvaveda text. A bulk of 1,875 ritual-focused verses of Yajurveda, in its numerous versions, also borrow and build upon the foundation of verses in Rigveda. Contents. Altogether the Rigveda consists of the Samhita, hymns to the deities, the oldest part of the Rigveda; the Brahmanas, commentaries on the hymns; the Aranyakas or forest books; the Upanishads. In Western usage, Rigveda usually refers to the Rigveda Samhita, while the Brahmanas are referred to as the Rigveda Brahmanas, etc. Technically speaking, however, the Rigveda refers to the entire body of texts transmitted along with the Samhita portion. Different bodies of commentary were transmitted in the different shakas or schools. Only a small portion of these texts has been preserved. The texts of only 2 out of 5 shakas mentioned by the Rigveda Pratashakya have survived. The late 15th or 16th century Sri Guru Charitra even claims the existence of 12 Rigvedic shakas. The 2 surviving Rigvedic corpora are those of the Sakala and the Baskala shakas. Hymns. The Rigvedic hymns are dedicated to various deities, chief of whom are Indra, a heroic god praised for having slain his enemy Vrtra, Agni, the sacrificial fire, and Soma, the sacred potion or the plant it is made from. Equally prominent gods are the Adityas or Asura gods Mitra Varuna and Ushas, the dawn. Also invoked are Savitar, Vishnu, Rudra, Pushan, Brihaspati or Brahmanaspati, as well as deified natural phenomena such as Dayas Pita, the shining sky, Father Heaven, Prithivi, the earth, Mother Earth, Surya, the sun god, Vayu or Vata, the wind, Apas, the waters, Paryanya, the thunder and rain, Vak, the word, many rivers, notably the Sapta Sindhu, and the Sarasvati river. The Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, Sadyas, Ashvins, Maruts, Rbhus, and the Vishvadevas, all gods, as well as the 33 gods, are the groups of deities mentioned. Mandala 1 comprises 191 hymns. Hymn 1.1 is addressed to Agni, and his name is the first word of the Rigveda. The remaining hymns are mainly addressed to Agni and Indra, as well as Varuna, Mitra, the Ashvins, the Maruts, Usas, Surya, Rbhus, Rudra, Vayu, Brihaspati, Vishnu, heaven and earth, and all the gods. This mandala is dated to have been added to Rigveda after Mandala 2 through 9, and includes the philosophical riddle hymn 1.164, which inspires chapters in later Upanishads such as the Mandaka. Mandala 2 comprises 43 hymns, mainly to Agni and Indra. It is chiefly attributed to the Rishi Gritsamata Sanahotra. Mandala 3 comprises 62 hymns, mainly to Agni and Indra and the Vishvadevas. The verse 3.62.10 has great importance in Hinduism as the Gayatri mantra. Most hymns in this book are attributed to Visvamitra Gathina. Mandala 4 comprises 58 hymns, mainly to Agni and Indra as well as the Rbhus, Ashvins, Burhaspati, Vayu, Usas, etc. Most hymns in this book are attributed to Vamadeva Gautama. Mandala 5 comprises 87 hymns, mainly to Agni and Indra, the Visvadevas, all the gods, the Maruts, the twin deity Mitra Varuna and the Asvins. 2 hymns each are dedicated to Ushas, the dawn, and to Savitar. Most hymns in this book are attributed to the Atri clan. Mandala 6 comprises 75 hymns, mainly to Agni and Indra, all the gods, Pusan, Ashvin, Usas, etc. Most hymns in this book are attributed to the Barhaspatya family of Angirasas. Mandala 7 comprises 104 hymns, to Agni, Indra, the Visvadevas, the Maruts, Mitra Varuna, the Asvins, Ushas, Indra Varuna, Vayu the wind, 2 each to Sarasvati ancient river, goddess of learning and Vishnu, and to others. Most hymns in this book are attributed to Vasistha Maitravaruni. Mandala 8 comprises 103 hymns to various gods. Hymns 8.49 to 8.59 are the apocryphal Valakilya. Hymns 1 to 48 and 60 to 66 are attributed to the Kanva clan, the rest to other Angirasa poets. Mandala 9 comprises 114 hymns, entirely devoted to Soma Pavamana, the cleansing of the sacred potion of the Vedic religion. Mandala 10 comprises additional 191 hymns, frequently in later language, addressed to Agni, Indra and various other deities. It contains the Nadastuti Sukta, which is in praise of rivers and is important for the reconstruction of the geography of the Vedic civilization, and the Purusha Sukta, which has been important in studies of Vedic sociology. It also contains the Nasadya Sukta 10.129, which deals with multiple speculations about the creation of universe, and whether anyone can know the right answer. The marriage hymns 10.85 and the death hymns 10.10–18 still are of great importance in the performance of the corresponding Grhya rituals. Rigveda Brahmanas. Of the Brahmanas that were handed down in the schools of the Bharchas, i.e., possessed of many verses, as the followers of the Rigveda are called, 2 have come down to us, namely those of the Aitarayans and the Kshatakans. The Aitareya Brahmana and the Kshataki or Sankhayana Brahmana evidently have for their groundwork the same stock of traditional exegetic matter. They differ, however, considerably as regards both the arrangement of this matter and their stylistic handling of it, with the exception of the numerous legends common to both, in which the discrepancy is comparatively slight. There is also a certain amount of material peculiar to each of them. The Kshataka is, upon the whole, far more concise in its style and more systematic in its arrangement features, which would lead one to infer that it is probably the more modern work of the 2. It consists of 30 chapters adhyaya, while the Aitareya has 40, divided into 8 books or pentads, pankeka, of 5 chapters each. The last 10 adhyayas of the latter work are, however, clearly a later addition, though they must have already formed part of it at the time of Panini c. 5th century BC, if, as seems probable, one of his grammatical sutras, regulating the formation of the names of Brahmanas, consisting of 30 and 40 adhyayas, refers to these 2 works. In this last portion occurs the well-known legend, also found in the Shankayana Sutra, but not in the Kshataki Brahmana, of Shunashepa, whom his father Ajigartha sells and offers to slay, the recital of which formed part of the inauguration of kings, while the Aitareya deals almost exclusively with the Soma sacrifice. The Kshataka, in its first 6 chapters, treats of the several kinds of haviryana, or offerings of rice, milk, ghee, etc., whereupon follows the Soma sacrifice in this way, that chapters 7 to 10 contain the practical ceremonial and 11 to 30 the recitations shastra of the Hotar. Sayana, in the introduction to his commentary on the work, ascribes the Aitareya to the sage Mahadasa Aitareya, i.e. son of Atara, also mentioned elsewhere as a philosopher, and it seems likely enough that this person arranged the Brahmana and founded the school of the Aitarayans. Regarding the authorship of the sister work we have no information, except that the opinion of the sage Kshataki is frequently referred to in it as authoritative, and generally in opposition to the Panya—the Brahmana, it would seem, of a rival school, the Pangans. Probably, therefore, it is just what one of the manuscripts calls it, The Brahmana of Sankhayana composed in accordance with the views of Kaushitaki. Rigveda, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Each of these two Brahmanas is supplemented by a forest book, or Aranyaka. The Aitareya Aranyaka is not a uniform production. It consists of 5 books Aranyaka, 3 of which, the first and the last 2, are of a liturgical nature, treating of the ceremony called Mahavrata, or Great Vow. The last of these books, composed in sutra form, is, however, doubtless of later origin, and is, indeed, ascribed by Hindu authorities either to Shaunaka or to Ashvalayana. The second and third books, on the other hand, are purely speculative, and are also styled the Bharcha Brahmana Upanishad. Again, the last 4 chapters of the second book are usually singled out as the Aitareya Upanishad, ascribed, like its Brahmana and the first book, to Mahadasa Aitareya, and the third book is also referred to as the Samhita Upanishad. As regards the Kaushitaki Aranyaka, this work consists of 15 adhyayas, the first 2 treating of the Mahavrata ceremony and the 7th and 8th of which correspond to the 1st, 5th, and 3rd books of the Aitareya Aranyaka, respectively, whilst the 4 adhyayas usually inserted between them constitute the highly interesting Kaushitaki Brahmana Upanishad, of which we possess 2 different recensions. The remaining portions 9 to 15 of the Aranyaka treat of the vital airs, the internal Agnihotra, etc., ending with the Vamsha, or succession of teachers. Dating and historical context. The Vedic Sanskrit text of the redacted version of the Rig Veda was transmitted remarkably unchanged, preserving, apart from certain prosodic changes, the systematic application of Sandhi rules, the linguistic stage of the Late Bronze Age. Because of the faithful preservation of the text, the language was no longer immediately understandable to scholars of classical Sanskrit by about 500 BC, necessitating commentaries interpreting the meaning of the text of the hymns. The Brahmanas contain numerous misinterpretations, due to this linguistic change, some of which were characterized by Sri Aurobindo as grotesque nonsense. The earliest texts were composed in Greater Punjab, northwest India and Pakistan, and the more philosophical later texts were most likely composed in or around the region that is the modern-era state of Haryana. Philological estimates tend to date the bulk of the text to the second half of the second millennium, being composed in an early Indo-Aryan language. The hymns must post-date the Indo-Iranian separation, dated to roughly 2000 BC. A reasonable date close to that of the composition of the core of the Rigveda is that of the Mitanni documents of c. 1400 BC, which contain Indo-Aryan nomenclature. Other evidence also points to a composition close to 1400 BC. The Rigveda's core is accepted to date to the Late Bronze Age, making it one of the few examples with an unbroken tradition. Its composition is usually dated to roughly between c. 1500 to 1200 BC. The Rigveda is far more archaic than any other Indo-Aryan text. For this reason, it was in the center of attention of Western scholarship from the times of Max Muller and Rudolf Roth onwards. The Rigveda records an early stage of Vedic religion. There are strong linguistic and cultural similarities with the early Iranian Avesta, deriving from the Proto-Indo-Iranian times, often associated with the early Andronovo culture, or rather, the Sintashta culture within the early Andronovo horizon of c. 2000 BC. The Rigveda offers no direct evidence of social or political system in Vedic era, whether ordinary or elite. Only hints such as cattle raising and horse racing are discernible, and the text offers very general ideas about the ancient Indian society. There is no evidence, state Jameson and Brereton, of any elaborate, pervasive or structured caste system. Social stratification seems embryonic, then and later a social ideal rather than a social reality. The society was pastoral with evidence of agriculture since hymns mention plough and celebrate agricultural divinities. There was division of labor, and complementary relationship between kings and poet-priests but no discussion of relative status of social classes. Women in Rigveda appear disproportionately as speakers in dialogue hymns, both as mythical or divine Indrani, Asparas Urvasi, or Yami, as well as Apala Atreyi (RV 8.91), Gada (RV 10.134.6), Gosa Kaksavati (RV 10.39.40), Ramasa (RV 1.126.7), Lopamudra (RV 1.179.1-2), Visvavara Atreyi (RV 5.28, Sachi Palomi RV 10.159, Sasvati Angirasi RV 8.1.34. The women of Rigveda are quite outspoken and appear more sexually confident than men, in the text. Elaborate and aesthetic hymns on wedding suggest rites of passage had developed during the Rigvedic period. There is little evidence of dowry and no evidence of sati in it or related Vedic texts. The Rigvedic hymns mention rice and porridge, in hymns such as 8.83, 8.70, 8.77, and 1.61 in some versions of the text, however, there is no discussion of rice cultivation. The term, ayas, metal, occurs in the Rigveda, but it is unclear which metal it was. Iron is not mentioned in Rigveda, something scholars have used to help date Rigveda to have been composed before 1000 BC. Hymn 5.63 mentions, "metal cloaked in gold", suggesting metal working had progressed in the Vedic culture. Some of the names of gods and goddesses found in the Rigveda are found amongst other belief systems based on Proto-Indo-European religion, while words used share common roots with words from other Indo-European languages. The horse, ashva, cattle, sheep, and goat play an important role in the Rigveda. There are also references to the elephant, Hastan, Varana, camel, Ustra, especially in Mandala 8, ass, Kara, Risabha, buffalo, Mahisa, wolf, hyena, lion, Simha, mountain goat, Sarabha, and to the gaur in the Rigveda. The peafowl, Mayura, the goose, Hamsa, and the chakravaka, Tadorna ferruginea, are some birds mentioned in the Rigveda. Topic: Reception in Hinduism. Shruti. The Vedas as a whole are classed as Shruti in Hindu tradition. This has been compared to the concept of divine revelation in Western religious tradition. But Stahl argues that, "It is nowhere stated that the Veda was revealed," and that Shruti simply means, "that what is heard, in the sense that it is transmitted from father to son or from teacher to pupil." The Rigveda, or other Vedas, do not anywhere assert that they are Aparusaya, and this reverential term appears only centuries after the end of the Vedic period in the texts of the Mimamsa school of Hindu philosophy. The text of Rigveda suggests it was composed by poets, human individuals whose names were household words in the Vedic age, states Stahl. Medieval Hindu scholarship. By the period of Puranic Hinduism, in the medieval period, the language of the hymns had become almost entirely unintelligible, and their interpretation mostly hinged on mystical ideas and sound symbolism. According to Hindu tradition, the Rigvedic hymns, along with the other Vedas, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas, were compiled by sage Vyasa. According to the Satapatha Brahmana, the number of syllables in the Rigveda is 432,000, but the surviving Rigveda does not confirm this number. The Rigveda does have embedded numerical patterns such as 10,800 stanzas, which corresponds to 30 times 360, and a fourth of 432 that appears in many Hindu contexts, 108 Upanishads. The Shatapatha Brahmana claims that there are 10,800,000 stars in the sky. According to Thomas McEvilley, an art historian and academic who compared Greek and Indian literature, the numbers such as 432 and 108 may be of significance to the Hindus, but many numerology claims do not verify, and the believer is left with the consolation of thinking that the missing are there, but unmanifest. The authors of the Brahmana literature discussed and interpreted the Vedic ritual. Yaska was an early commentator of the Rigveda by discussing the meanings of difficult words. In the 14th century, Sayana wrote an exhaustive commentary on it. A number of other commentaries were written during the medieval period, including the commentaries by Skandasvaman pre-Sayana, roughly of the Gupta period, Ujjitha pre-Sayana, Venkata Madhava pre-Sayana, c. 10th to 12th centuries, and Mudgala Purana after Sayana, an abbreviated version of Sayana's commentary. Arya Samaj and Aurobindo movements. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, some reformers like Swami Dayananda Saraswati, founder of the Arya Samaj, Sri Aurobindo, founder of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, discussed the Vedas, including the Rig Veda, for their philosophies. According to Robson, Dayanand believed, "There were no errors in the Vedas, including the Rigveda, and if anyone showed him an error, he would maintain that it was a corruption added later." Dayananda and Aurobindo interpret the Vedic scholars had a monotheistic conception. Aurobindo attempted to interpret hymns to Agni in the Rigveda as mystical. Aurobindo states that the Vedic hymns were a quest after a higher truth, define the RTA basis of dharma, conceive life in terms of a struggle between the forces of light and darkness, and sought the ultimate reality. Contemporary Hinduism. Rigveda, in contemporary Hinduism, has been a reminder of the ancient cultural heritage and point of pride for Hindus, with some hymns still in use in major rites of passage ceremonies, but the literal acceptance of most of the textual essence is long gone. Louis Renou wrote that the text is a distant object, and, "even in the most orthodox domains, the reverence to the Vedas has come to be a simple raising of the hat." Musicians and dance groups celebrate the text as a mark of Hindu heritage, through incorporating Rigvedic hymns in their compositions, such as in Hamsavana and Subhapuntuvarali of Carnatic music, and these have remained popular among the Hindus for decades. However, the contemporary Hindu beliefs are distant from the precepts in the ancient layer of Rigveda Samhitas. The social history and context of the Vedic texts are extremely distant from contemporary Hindu religious beliefs and practice. A reverence for the Vedas as an exemplar of Hindu heritage continues to inform a contemporary understanding of Hinduism. Popular reverence for Vedic scripture is similarly focused on the abiding authority and prestige of the Vedas rather than on any particular exegesis or engagement with the subject matter of the text. In contemporary Hindu nationalism, the Rigveda has also been adduced in the indigenous Aryans debate, see Out of India theory. These theories are controversial. Monism debate. While the older hymns of the Rigveda reflect sacrificial ritual typical of polytheism, its younger parts, specifically Mandalas 1 and 10, have been noted as containing monistic or henotheistic speculations. A widely cited example of such speculations is hymn 1.164.46. Max Muller notably introduced the term, henotheism, for the philosophy expressed here, avoiding the connotations of monotheism in Judeo-Christian tradition. Other widely cited examples of monistic tendencies include hymns 1.164, 8.36 and 10.31. Other scholars state that Rigveda includes an emerging diversity of thought, including monotheism, polytheism, henotheism and pantheism, the choice left to the preference of the worshipper, and the Nasadiya Sukta 10.129, one of the most widely cited Rigvedic hymns in popular Western presentations. Ruse 2015 commented on the old discussion of monotheism versus henotheism versus monism by noting an atheistic streak in hymns such as 10.130. Examples from Mandala 1 adduced to illustrate the metaphysical nature of the contents of the younger hymns include 1.164.34, "What is the ultimate limit of the earth? What is the center of the universe? What is the semen of the cosmic horse? What is the ultimate source of human speech?" 1.164.34, "Who gave blood, soul, spirit to the earth? How could the unstructured universe give origin to this structured world?" 1.164.5, "Where does the sun hide in the night? Where do gods live?" 1.164.6, Where is the unborn support for the born universe?" 1.164.20, a hymn that is widely cited in the Upanishads as the parable of the body and the soul. "Two birds with fair wings, inseparable companions, have found refuge in the same sheltering tree. One incessantly eats from the fig tree, the other, not eating, just looks on." Translations. The first published translation of any portion of the Rigveda in any European language was into Latin, by Friedrich August Rosen, Rigveda Specimen, London 1830. Predating Muller's editio princeps of the text by 19 years, Rosen was working from manuscripts brought back from India by Colebrooke. H. H. Wilson was the first to make a complete translation of the Rig Veda into English, published in 6 volumes during the period 1850–88. Wilson's version was based on the commentary of Sayana. Muller's Rig Veda Sanhita in 6 volumes. Muller, Max, ed. W. H. Allen & Co., London, 1849 has an English preface. The birch bark from which Muller produced his translation is held at the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, Pune, India. The Rigveda is the earliest, the most venerable, obscure, distant and difficult for moderns to understand, hence is often misinterpreted or worse, used as a peg on which to hang an idea or a theory. Like all archaic texts, the Rigveda is difficult to translate into modern language. There are no closely contemporary extant texts, which makes it difficult to interpret. And early translations contain straightforward errors. Another issue is the choice of translation for technical terms such as mandala, conventionally translated book, but more literally rendered cycle. Some notable translations of the Rig Veda include See also Kesson Mayaveda Notes